You would be awful at live streaming.
I absolutely would. I'm so bad at it already. That's why I stopped doing it. Because
that natural pressure.
I'm not good at it.
Yeah, you see the record button and
I'm like,
immediately...
okay, whoo, action. All right, okay, it's go time. And then that continues for about a minute straight. Yeah, no, I stopped doing live streaming just because it's like, okay, there's 4 people watching me right now. Woo!
And so now we do this, where we have this on screen and like things are progressively being made, although the outline of this is already drawn. Mm-hmm. So now we're going into what you like to do, what you're trying to get more into, which is watercoloring.
Yes.
So you are Natalie Sweet, you are this artist of this local area, and I am this friend that has technology and a nice microphone.
Yes.
And we are talking about something that you did kind of for me, but kind of for yourself. You wanted to work more with watercolors, and I have this favorite character, Spider-Gwen, right here on screen. She's cool. She's been mostly a comic for only about like 3 or 4 years, a relatively new character. Thankfully for me, her becoming my favorite character very quickly, she is now on a movie. She's been on a couple TV shows, and her series, her original creators ended their run, and it's still going on. So Marvel, I get to know now that they like her and can keep going. So you liked it, and I told you to do it because she has a very unique color palette. You know, she has a lot of like fuchsia, teal, going into more purples and reds and all that, and a lot of black and white contrast. And so you wanted to do a lot more watercoloring. So why'd you want to do watercoloring?
Watercolor specifically because it's not a material that I get to work with very often. A lot of my work is I do a lot of landscapes, very traditional kinds of things like that, very realistic. And so you don't, in nature, find these bright teals and reds and blues and purples right next to each other in the natural world very often. So I don't get to use those colors, and I don't get to use watercolor because you can't layer it very well when it comes to natural scenes. So this is an opportunity to use it technically in a way that I don't get to with a lot of my other work.
Okay. So with this, like, kind of like bleeding into each thing, so you say like it's hard to layer. Mm-hmm. So then how do you like kind of come across like all these different like places right here? Like obviously it seems like the edges are more teal, and you go inside the middle bit and you see like around her body there's that little bit of pink and fuchsia, and then it kind of goes out to a purple and back to a teal. So do you have to layer it in terms of like actually just spaces on the paper, or do you have to, is there a way that you can kind of bleed them into each other?
Yes. So when I say watercolor isn't easy to layer, it's kind of not true. It is very, very easy to layer because it is so translucent. But what you cannot do, it's very difficult to have a very clear, like, foreground on top of a background, and have it, like, it's very difficult to have a very opaque layer. And for that reason, it's difficult. It's not like acrylic or oil where you can have, this is my background, this is my foreground. You have to very carefully plot out how you're going to do the background and the foreground separately, because they can bleed into each other, which is good if you want that. But if I want her to be pure white in the foreground, I have to deliberately avoid that. Okay. Avoid those layers. That's why watercolor is very tricky, because it's great for layering. That's actually how you should do it. But I have to be very mindful of where my foreground is in relation to the background.
Okay. So when you get to that kind of like spatial awareness, when it comes to lighting, then is like the lighting when it comes to like, you know, her hood and all the whites, obviously that's where you're going to notice that more. Like you see like, you know, the darkened shades where it gets more gray, especially in her hood and kind of in her armpit. So when you're doing that, is that watercolor, or is that kind of you still doing more penciling? Or?
Well, that's all watercolor. That was actually a lot of fun to do, because you can use it, you can layer it very, very, very lightly. One, like, very, very little bit of pigmentation at a time, and you can get that really, really cool soft, where it still looks like a white object, but it is shaded. So that's what I really like about watercolors. You do actually have quite a lot of control over it, but also nobody actually, I mean, white watercolor paint is not very commonly used. So that's why, like, there's actually no paint, like, on her face, on her eyes, on the very top of her hood where there's those highlights. There's no paint or any pigmentation or anything there. So that's what's actually kind of cool about it, is like a subtractive method almost.
Okay. So the watercolor is basically used sort of for the aesthetic.
Yes.
And those fine, yeah. So I imagine that would be very hard to use as like a fine detail sort of thing.
You can get fine details with it, but yeah, you obviously can't do, you have to be very careful with it. You can use white other things to get very highlighted areas. You can use white pencil on top, you can use white acrylic on top, but obviously you have to be very careful with blending your materials and all that.
Yeah, it sounds like it'd be a little rough.
Yes.
it's almost like it's like the delicate balance, like in between audio, where it's like there's going to be a lot of stuff that's very clearly defined. You're going to hear, in my experience with drums, you're always going to hear the snare, but then you have to like figure out like, okay, that microphone is going to pick up these hi-hats, going to pick up these cymbals and stuff like that. If you're doing a live sound, you have to be very conscious of your room. Yeah, if you're in an arena, it doesn't matter. You can just play whatever and it's going to work. If you're in a small room, you have to realize, okay, my hits, they're all going to bleed into each other, so I need to make sure each instrument is blending together so you hear everything. So
Exactly.
you see everything in this. You get all that wash kind of by the watercolor. I think that's really cool. It like sets an aesthetic.
Yeah. Watercolor is very much, it's all about the aesthetic of it. You can still get details and really, really great effects with lighting, but you have to be very deliberate with it.
Yeah, especially because you can like see all the elements of where like the true color like lies. Like you like obviously getting closer to her arm, you get kind of a little bit more of the pinkness than you kind of get to like her hood and all that. You see like which colors it's supposed to accent between like the colors like on the bend of her arm, inside her hood, and around her eyes. Getting the teal on her shoes and seeing it fade out on the edges, and then getting that like pure purple where her foot rests, and like it's kind of like there's no like the light can't dilute it. It's that pure thing. And then as the light comes in, it bleeds it out.
Yeah.
That's really neat. I like that a lot. Yeah. Details.
Yeah. Basic elements and principles of art.
Yeah. Just
Unity.
Woo.
Yeah.
I took it class. Yes, definitely. I just don't pay too much attention to things.
Yeah. Yeah, it's so weird going back to basic elements and principles when you're doing stuff like this. Like, I have this pop of teal in her shoes, but I want the whole thing to look unified as it is kind of the standout color of the piece, so that's why I bring that teal into the corners and the fade as well.
Yeah.
So that it's not, it looks like it's cohesive.
Exactly. Yeah, it's really cool. I mean, you can apply that to a lot of things. I think as an artist, once you kind of get to a point where you're really focusing a lot of those like minute details, suddenly you almost forget about the small things sometimes. It's like it's breathing almost. You know, there's certain things you can do and you don't think about it. It's robotic, it's muscle memory, but sometimes you get caught in the like, you know, super technical things where you're for a second like, wait, do I know how to walk? I've been running this whole time.
Yeah. Oh
It's-
my.
Yeah, it's definitely a rough process. But like, yeah, I think this character is near dear to my heart. I think that particularly her style is super unique, and I think when you look at her as a character that I assume is fun to draw, she's certainly fun to look at.
Of course.
And I think they take a lot from her style in the comics, and like the way they do it in the film that I think she'll be most popularly recognized from is really cool, because her comic does look like that, like in terms of color palette.
Yes.
There's just alternative colors all over the place. A primary color is used to drive a point home. Like, for example, her villain, which I absolutely love and adore, because I love the Daredevil Netflix series with all of my heart as someone that just likes a pure narrative and, you know, just different ways to take in different narratives. I think it's so well written. Take that all in, and if you see that series, you can get all you need to know about Daredevil to understand why it is super cool that Daredevil is basically her villain.
Yeah.
Her villain is Kingpin, but it's not Wilson Fisk. Wilson Fisk is just an afterthought. No, in this universe, Daredevil gave in to everything, and he is just bad guy. You know, he just was like, you know what, the hand's kind of cool. I'll just be the leader of them, and I'll have all these shadow ninjas. I'll just be Matt Murdock. I'm not technically Daredevil. I'm just Matt Murdock. If I need something to get done, I'm in like the black, you know, bandana over my face and like the Muay Thai ropes and just punching people to death. But, you know, that's who he is, and I think it's a cool contrast to like her like super bright, vibrant environment, and like the way she's penciled by her original artist is super like guerrillas, like punk rock. Like there's sharp edges, but they're also kind of loose, and you can see the penciling underneath the fine penning, inking. That's the word. Yes, words. But like it sets a really cool contrast. You see this hero with this color palette that's not just like bright, but like alternative.
Yes.
You have these like really warm, inviting colors that you bring you into this almost modern aesthetic, and then you have the harsh, you know, red, black, sometimes deep purple with like Daredevil in the hand. And I think it makes a really good narrative. Like right away, you know, these are the guys, these are the good guys, these are the bad guys. They even flip that on you more, where the Punisher is kind of like her mini boss when she starts, because, you know, obviously she's Gwen Stacy. If you know enough about Spider-Man to begin with, you know who Gwen Stacy is, and so kind of by proxy, you know who Captain Stacy is. Sort of the Jim Gordon of Marvel, only the opposite. Instead of Jim Gordon be like, oh yeah, Batman's really cool, I like him a lot, Captain Stacy's like, hey, Spider-Man, you're not so cool. Kind of get out of town here, bud.
Yeah.
And hey, he can't really say it, but in the back of your mind, he's like, I'm dating your daughter. And that's kind of like a backhanded thing he would love to, I'm sure, just onto Captain Stacy, but he doesn't get to. And in this universe, like, Peter Parker dies, so it's not about him. He's kind of out of the picture. And I like that because you don't want to think about Peter Parker as a character in this universe. You just want to think about Gwen. Mm-hmm. And they do a really good job of setting her apart and making her be a character where you compare her to the original Spider-Man, but as a theme and not Peter Parker.
Right.
You get that whole thing, like, her personal life is something that's constantly falling apart because of being Spider-Woman, and that is kind of how Peter Parker works, only for him, his personal life is being ruined. Or no, his life as Spider-Man, and sometimes it's also ruined by being Peter Parker. And, like, vice versa. Just, like, this whole thing where it's, like, the two identities can't coexist. As, like, this hero that he wants to personify, but he is Peter Parker. He's this dork that suddenly has to figure out what to do. Gwen Stacy isn't a dork. Gwen Stacy's super cool.
Yeah.
She's just bad at life.
Yeah.
Like, everything, she's in a punk band, she's a drummer, she has all these friends, and she has, like, this, like, identity that she doesn't have a crisis with. It's just, like, her being a superhero is just ruining that, and you see her degrade, and it's nice, it's cool. And so when Captain Stacy kind of realizes immediately that, oh my gosh, my daughter is Spider-Woman, because it's a very easy thing to determine, like, oh, wow, this superhero came up, and suddenly my daughter is awful, and I never see her. And just immediately, it's like, oh, I saw Spider-Woman at my daughter's first concert, and then she was gone, and Spider-Woman was there. It's like, they piece that together very quickly. It's like, it's out of the way. He knows. And so Frank Castle, as the Punisher, is a cop under Captain Stacy. And I love that, too, first of all. Just the idea of Frank Castle being like, I'm going to give in to the law, but as almost like my Dexter way of finding people that I can just beat on, and then, like, he does it in Daredevil's way. He swaps positions with Daredevil almost. Where it's like Daredevil's always like, no, the law, it works. Frank Castle's like, nah, kill people. And this one, it's like Daredevil's like, nah, kill people. And Frank Castle's like, nah, the law, so I can go and beat people up as Punisher to give them to the law. And it's a cool proxy, but then immediately, like, everyone wants to hate Spider-Woman because if you've seen the movie, she kills Peter Parker kind of on accident. So Punisher is like, criminal, I gotta take her down. And then, so, like, her whole thing is proving to the Punisher throughout, like, being her first, like, mini boss, and then being an overarching character in proving how she evolves as a hero throughout her whole arc is trying to get the Punisher to accept her. And then at one point, the Punisher trying to bring her back to reality when he sees that she's going too far in reality. I don't know, I can ramble forever. she's really just such a good character, and I think that, like, the fact that she is such a good character in her own right, she creates an aesthetic, that aesthetic works and all that, she's going on forward. And I think right now, since she's past her original artist, sometimes I look at the new art and I can feel a weird, mild disappointment looking at it, and thinking to myself, like, oh man, like, it's kind of gone on to a new generation of artists now. Comics, they're always moving past it. You always want, like, different artists working in different things. You always want to see someone's interpretation of something, because, you know, the original artist, you have this reference, but you know that that's just not how this industry works. The same person will not work on the same character forever. So now that that's kind of gone for me, and I'm trying to, like, soak in new people doing it, I like seeing this artwork. I like seeing fan art of this character, and I like seeing different people take such different approaches where you can see her aesthetic get blended in these watercolors, and like, you know, still kind of keep a bit of her sharpness, but let it kind of bleed out like her original artwork did. So. Yeah,
it's something that I appreciate about the design of her character is she's so refreshing compared to a lot of comic book characters in her design and her aesthetic. There's not a lot that you can do with these bright purples and teals and reds in the comic book universe. There's so few characters that do take advantage of those bright colors instead of, you know, all black or maybe just the very basic red and blue.
Yeah. Get your Captain Americas and your Spider-Man.
Yeah. And, you know, obviously those characters are iconic in their own way, but this is so refreshing.
Oh, yeah. I don't know, like, this character brings a lot of interesting things, especially if you want to end it up on a weird kind of wrap of a note. The romance in Spider-Verse, they hint at it. They're like, oh, they're cool. At the end of the day, he kind of ambiguously gets the girl.
Yeah. In
her comics, she, like, has a bit of romance with him for a second. She kind of meets him, and they kind of spark a thing, but they don't let that go anywhere.
Right.
But then they kind of give her, like, a whole, like, Council of Ricks thing where she's, like, throughout, like, this multiverse, there are all these Spider-Gwens that are, like, trying to keep things together. And in one of them, she goes to the future and she sees these two, kiddo Spider-Gwens and like weird mixes of like teal, purple, red, and black. And she finds out that she like marries and has kids with Miles Morales. Fascinating. But also those kids have like the coolest alternative costume because they take that.
I'm sure.
And they take the white away and they just like say like, okay, the way that we can separate apart is white. Even though you take the teal and the fuchsia and you make that her thing, there's still so much white. Mm-hmm. So what they do to make her kids different is they just take that white out and replace it with different things as like the primary.
That's actually really cool.
Yeah, it's really cool. So yeah, this is Spider-Gwen by a one Natalie Sweet, and now recorded by a me, Brandon Garza, as I try to promote both myself and having nothing to do with this process.
That's fair.
Yes, I am the interviewee. This is my show. I am Space Ghost, and this is my show. But yeah, thank you so much for watching. If you do like all this content, if you like this art even, there are ways you can find us. We have a website that I'll put in the description that you can find her, contact us, get some commissioned art, as well as subscribe to this channel so you can look at more art, watch it being made, watch us talk about it, hear the inspirations, and hear the process. I hope you guys enjoy. Thank you so much.